Mystery is a never-ending trail. Mystery is an invisible veil that shrouds reality. It lives between the shadows of doubt and the whispers of curiosity. In every human step, there is always something hidden, waiting to be discovered, but never truly willing to be revealed. Mystery is a space that stretches endlessly, where time seems to stand still and logic no longer rules. It is a question that provokes both fear and courage. It tests the limits of the mind, toys with feelings, and leads people on a journey that often finds no answer. Mystery invites us to go further, exploring corridors where light has never been touched, touching sides of reality whose existence we have long doubted. In mystery, we learn that not everything must be seen to be believed. Not all signs can be easily read. There are secrets lurking in every second of life, in the gaze of a stranger, in an old house standing alone, in natural phenomena that are difficult to explain, and even in the whispers of the night that awaken our deepest fears. And perhaps that's precisely where the beauty lies. Not in the ending, nor in the answers we seek, but in the journey to uncover the truth, which often leads us to realize that the world is too vast to fully understand. There's a story about mystical and horror, taken from a book. A true story, not fabricated. This book was written by a powerful witness to the events at that time. They titled the story, "The Ghost Guarding an Old Building in a Corner of the City." In a long-forgotten corner of the city stands an old colonial-era building. It used to be the office of a famous factory. However, after a major fire decades ago, the place was never used again. The paint on the walls was peeling, the windows were broken, and the front door was always locked by a large, rusty chain. People in the neighborhood believed that an invisible guardian still cared for the building, something or someone long dead. Chapter 1. Ignored Prohibitions. Aska, a college student who enjoys creating horror content, heard the rumor from local residents. That night, with two friends, Diaz and Randy, he decided to go in to see if the story was true. "Don't go in there after dark," warned a shopkeeper as they gathered in front of the building. "Why?" Aska asked. "Because after sunset, the ones in charge of guarding that place aren't humans." Randy and Diaz looked at each other, feeling the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. But curiosity was stronger than fear. They waited until night fell. Carrying cameras and flashlights, they dared to break the rusty door chain. As soon as the door opened, the damp air and the smell of burning charcoal wafted in. Their flashlights illuminated a long corridor filled with debris and factory equipment petrified by time. "Record everything," Aska whispered. Chapter 2. Sounds from upstairs. Their footsteps echoed through every room. Burnt notes still littered the floor. Suddenly, they heard footsteps from the second floor. Knock, knock, knock. Diaz stopped walking. "Who is that?" he muttered. Randy tried to laugh. "Probably a big rat." But the footsteps sounded regular. Not like an animal, but like someone on patrol. They climbed up, recording. At the bottom of the stairs, they found a partially charred sign, still clearly written. Chief Warden's room. As soon as the door to the room was pushed open, a rustling sound was heard, like someone dragging a metal chain across the floor. Their flashlights suddenly dimmed as if sucked into the darkness. Aska sharpened the camera into the room. And in the shadows, he saw a tall man wearing an old factory supervisor's uniform, his face burned. His eyes were blank, but he was staring directly at them. "Are you new workers?" His voice was hoarse and heavy. "This place is still operating. Everyone who enters must work." The figure stepped forward. Each step was accompanied by the clink of chains wrapped around his body. Chapter 3. No Way Out. Run. Aska shouted. They ran down the stairs, but when they reached the bottom, the main door they had broken down earlier was tightly closed with chains that now looked brand new, gleaming like freshly cast iron. Diaz tried to hit the chains, but they only bounced off. Panicked, they ran down another hallway. On the walls, scorched writing appeared, as if scorched with fire. "Do not leave the workplace." Randy stared at the camera, which was still on. In the footage, a black shadow continued to follow them. getting closer with each flash of light. Suddenly, from the darkness, a large, charred hand grabbed Rendy's back and dragged him. Rendy screamed hysterically, but his voice seemed to be swallowed up by the darkness. Aska and Diaz could only watch as their friend's body disappeared behind the rust-handled door, which slammed shut with a loud bang. Rendy. Chapter 4. The guards' agreement. They were cornered in a large hall, where the former production machine stood like a dead iron giant. The figure of the guard emerged from the dark, billowing smoke. "You can't leave. I'm the last guard. I'm burning alive here, guarding those who break the rules." The man lifted his melted face and stared straight at Aska. "However, if one of you is willing to take my place, the other two can leave." Diaz stared at Aska with wide, fearful eyes. "Az, don't listen to him. He's lying." But Aska saw the suffering in that figure. A long loneliness. A never-ending task. "If I take your place, will my friends be safe?" "A promise I always keep," he replied softly. Aska swallowed. Then he nodded in resignation. The guard placed his large, black hand on Aska's shoulder. Instantly, chains appeared, wrapping around his body. Aska screamed, but his voice slowly faded along with the light in his eyes. Chapter 5. The two remaining victims. Diaz ran without looking back. The main door was now wide open. He exited, falling to the ground in front of the old building. That night, there was no more chase. No more footsteps. The next morning, residents found Diaz dazed and crying. When the police entered to inspect the building, they found no one inside. There was no trace of Aska or Rendy. However, since that night, people began hearing the sound of chains every time they passed the building. Sometimes someone saw a tall shadow watching from the second-floor window. And reportedly, the guard was now younger. His uniform was no longer that of the old guard. Instead, it was the black jacket Aska usually wore in his videos. The old building remained closed to this day. And the new guard, still working. There's another, even more horrific and spooky story about the ghost of the old building resident. It happened in an old building in the neighboring village. The old building is also a colonial relic. The paint on the walls is peeling, the windows are broken in several places, and the front yard is overgrown with knee-high weeds. Local residents prefer to cross the street rather than walk directly in front of the building. Although there have never been any clear sightings, the eerie silence and chill surrounding the building are enough to deter people from approaching. The building was once a colonial government office, before being taken over after independence. However, a mysterious fire in the 1970s left it abandoned. Many say the incident claimed lives, but the names of the victims were never made public. Since then, the building has been left abandoned, waiting to be destroyed by time. But apparently, it's not just memories that remain. Something, or someone, still lives there. The story goes, a young man named Raka and 3 of his friends, Dina, Baggers, and Riri, architecture students, were given a final assignment to research and design a restoration concept for a historic building. Their professor chose an old building on Jalan Merdeka as the object of study. "Does it really have to be that building, sir?" Baggers asked during class. "They say it's haunted." The lecturer just chuckled. "Old buildings are usually filled with stories. You're architects, not ghost hunters. Focus on the building." There was no other choice. After securing permission from the city authorities, they decided to visit the building the next afternoon. Raka was the most enthusiastic. He wanted to prove that all the mystical stories were mere suggestions. However, Dina, a girl with a slight sensitivity to the supernatural, had a bad feeling from the start. When they arrived in front of the building, the sun was already starting to set. The orange afternoon light accentuated the building, which seemed to still stand with remnants of its former glory, yet shrouded in a gloomy aura. Raka pushed open the fragile-looking front door. Strangely, it opened slowly, as if welcoming their arrival. Usually old doors like this jam. Riri muttered, shivering. Dina stared into the dark hallway inside the building. "I'm not sure we should go in now." "Too late to say, Din," Baggers replied, turning on the flashlight. Their footsteps echoed, bouncing off the decaying walls. Along the hallway hung black and white photographs of Dutch men in uniform, but some of the faces in the photos looked worn, as if they had been deliberately scratched out. Only parts of the faces were missing. The deeper they walked, the colder the air around them became. The electricity had been out for a long time. Then suddenly, there was a whisper from upstairs. Raka separated himself to look for the stairs to the second floor, while the others recorded the structural changes on the ground floor. As he photographed the old pillars, he heard soft footsteps upstairs. Small steps, like glass slippers on wood. Knock, knock, knock. Raka looked up. "Hello. Is anyone up there?" There was no answer, but the footsteps could still be heard, moving slowly toward the stairs. Curiosity mixed with courage, Raka slowly climbed. But as soon as his foot touched the fourth step, the footsteps stopped completely. The silence was even more terrifying. Suddenly, throat. The sound of a door slamming loudly from upstairs made Raka jump back. Dina, Baggers, and Riri immediately ran over. "What's wrong, Rak?" Baggers asked. "Someone." Raka stopped, looking at the camera. In his photo, at the end of the second floor corridor, there was a small silhouette, like a child in a white shirt, standing silently, looking at him. He was sure the corridor was empty when the photo was taken. Despite his fear, they had to complete this task. They arrived at a large archive room. There were still folders and typewriter documents from the old era. Baggers moved a heavy, half-collapsed filing cabinet, and behind it was a small door, locked with an old chain. Dina felt a sharp chill from the gap in the door. "Don't open it," she whispered, trembling. But Baggers, ever curious, began to pull on the rusty chain. As soon as the chain was released, a pungent, burning smell wafted in. Riri swallowed. "It smells like something burning." The small door creaked open slowly. The small, pitch-black room, but the traces of fire were clearly visible. The walls were black. The floor looked scorched, and in the middle of the room, a wooden deer doll lay, charred on one side, as if it had burned with its owner. As Baggers was about to take a photo, the doll suddenly moved, falling toward them. Riri immediately screamed. Dup 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 dup. The sound of small footsteps ran behind them, heading down the hall. They turned simultaneously. No one was there, but the doll was now standing upright, facing the exit, as if signaling, "Follow me." Past wounds, the doll walked alone toward a large, dust-covered door. Raka dared to push it open, and they entered a spacious hall. There was a large stage in front, with wooden chairs neatly arranged, as if still waiting for an audience. On the stage, there was an old wheelchair covered in a shabby white cloth. As Dina stared at the chair, she saw a flash, the image of a girl in a white dress, sitting in a wheelchair, head down, crying. Then the flash changed, flames blazing, people screaming in panic, and the child trapped. Dina staggered backward, her face pale. She was trapped when this building burned, she muttered almost inaudibly. As they approached the wheelchair, the cover fell off by itself, and the stuffed deer had somehow found its way onto the chair's lap. Suddenly, a child's voice rang out, soft but clear, "Help me." The voice came from behind them. The voice came from behind them. When they turned around, a little girl in a shabby white dress was standing nearby. Her long hair covered half her face, and her skin was as pale as ash, but the left side of her body was covered in burn scars. She stared at them with sad eyes. "Help! I can't get out." The truth revealed. The little girl's figure slowly approached. Dina, the most sensitive, dared to ask, What's your name?" The girl stared at her, then murmured softly, "Amelia." Amelia pointed to the archive room. "I was trapped there when the fire came. They locked the door because I'm a local child, not a colonized person. Amelia's tears fell, then evaporated into black smoke. They left me alone. The room suddenly became very cold. The long-extinguished chandeliers suddenly swung and made a tinkling sound. Amelia stared at them again, this time with a dark, angry look in her eyes. "You're going to leave me too?" With a scream that shattered the tranquility of the building, the hall doors slammed shut. Brack. Amelia disappeared, and all the chairs in the hall moved on their own, attacking them. They ran as fast as they could toward the front door. The hallway outside the hall suddenly grew longer, much longer than before. Every step felt like it wasn't getting them any closer to the exit. The deer doll reappeared, this time in front of Riri. Riri froze. Then her body seemed to be dragged by something invisible toward the second floor. "Riri!" Baggers screamed, but the entire hallway was rocked by the sound of crying and laughter at the same time. A child's cry, and laughter filled with resentment. Dina braced herself, hugging Raka and Baggers. "We have to stay calm. She needs help, not our fear." Raka immediately pulled out his phone and turned on the voice recorder. "Amelia, we won't leave you. We'll tell you what happened. People need to know." The crying slowly subsided. The hallway returned to its original form, and Riri fell right in front of them, unconscious, but safe. Amelia appeared again. This time her face was calmer, but still sad. "Really? You guys are going to let me go?" Dina nodded. "You just want to be free from the pain, right?" Amelia smiled for the first time. Her body faded, becoming a shard of light. Then, "Thank you." Then, she disappeared completely. Then promised to a quiet spirit suddenly, the front door opened by itself. The sounds of birds and wind became real again. They rushed out, panting and trembling. Dina took one last look at the building. Maybe, she's finally free. A few months later, thanks to the data and stories they had gathered, the government officially investigated the building's historical records. And sure enough, there was a child victim who was never mentioned in the official fire report. Her name was Amelia. The building was finally restored. At the entrance, they placed a plaque, "To Amelia, the forgotten victim. May you now rest in peace." Since then, residents no longer felt the eerie aura when they passed the building, because the trapped residents had finally found their way home. The end.